For the paper mache portion of the project, you are looking to apply a layer of paper mache over your whole sculpture to kind of act like the skin. We have the skeletal system, we have the muscular system, and now we are ready to add skin on top. Now, I think the best thing to use for paper mache is just strips of newspaper. So if you just take regular old newspaper and kind of cut it down, you can tear the newspaper up, and it works really, really well for paper mache. If you don't have newspaper, another option would be working with computer paper, but it's just that newspaper is a little more flimsy than computer paper. So if you're gonna take this option, I would recommend crumpling that newspaper several times and then flattening it back out to just sort of soften it. So I'm just sort of crumpling it up, stretching it out, crumpling it again, stretching it out, and just really softening, kind of breaking down the fibers that are in that paper some, so that you've got a little bit more flexible paper to use. And you don't want to use it big like this. You would probably take it, cut it in half, and then you can cut, same thing, some strips. It's probably not going to tear maybe as easily as the computer paper, although you could try it. Actually, that's fine. All right, so just tearing some strips. These strips are about 1 inch in width, and those will work. If you don't have computer paper and you need another option, you can use paper towels. The thinner the paper towel, the better. The thicker they are, the more absorbent they're gonna be, and they'll be a little bit harder to work with. So like, kind of the cheaper the better if you're gonna work with paper towels. And it's the same deal where you're just gonna tear them into about 1 inch wide strips. All right, so those are the paper materials you can use for the paper mache. The mache part, the paste itself, you have a couple different options. The very best option, what works the best, is to use regular all-purpose flour, just you know, your super cheap store brand basic flour, okay? You're probably, for a sculpture the size of mine, you might use about a cup, maybe 2 cups of flour, okay? So you can know regarding like what size bag to get, but just regular all-purpose flour, and you mix the flour with water in a separate container. The measurements you'll use, it's about 1 part flour to 1 part water. So if you use a 1/4 cup of flour, you're gonna use about a 1/4 cup of water. And you stir them together until they're smooth. It should be about the thickness of like pretty thin pancake batter. If you have any clumps, then make sure you just really get those clumps stirred in so it's nice and smooth. It also doesn't really save well, so you probably don't want to mix up like all of your paper mache for your whole project in one sitting, but instead mix up like enough for what you think you're going to get done that day, and then come back and mix another batch the next time you're going to be working with it. All right, so this is just flour and water mixed about 1 to 1. If it seems super soupy thin, you could always add a little bit more flour. If it seems really thick and clumpy, you can add a little more water. That's about the measurements. Another thing you can use is just watered down glue. So just regular Elmer's white school glue or store brand school glue, you know, whatever kind of white liquid glue you have, and just put it in a container and water it down. So this is, I'm not sure how well you can see it on here, but it's just real liquidy, watered down. The glue is too thick to get things to stick really well. So this is just a second option for you. Now, when you're paper macheing, I highly recommend covering your surface. It's really messy, and you will make your life much easier if you put down some newspaper to cover what you're working on first. Once you have your materials prepared, you're going to start applying the paste. I think the easiest way of doing this is to work in layers. So rather than dipping your strips into the paste, I really like to just apply the paste itself to the surface. Then you apply your paper material, whether that's newspaper, computer paper, or paper towels, and then come back on and apply a second layer of the paste right on top of that paper material. That second layer of paste, whether it's the glue or the flour and water mixture, is really important. If you only do 1 layer and then apply your paper to the 1 layer, it's not going to want to stick or be real smooth. So make sure you come back on top of it and you apply that second layer of paste onto the surface of the paper material, and just smooth everything down really well with that second layer of paste. In order to have a nice surface for the next part of your work, you really want to make sure you're smoothing everything down nicely. You also want to make sure that you're fully covering every area of your sculpture. So look for those sneaky little nooks and crannies that you need to get some paper and paste over to cover, so that you've got a nice smooth surface once it's dry to work some surface design onto. As you're working, if you run out of paste, you can just fill up with some new paste by remixing with the same measurement, about 1 part flour to 1 part water. Sometimes you might have to add a little extra flour or a little extra water to get to the right consistency, but then you can just continue right along working. You'll notice as I finish, I choose to not cover the wires of my little tentacle parts that are sticking out of my creature's head. Those little skinny areas are really hard to cover well with paper mache, and I think that the wire by itself looks fine to just leave without that covering. When you're totally finished, you'll want to find something to stand your work on so that it can get airflow around all sides to fully dry. I like using these little tape rings to set mine on. It gives it a great surface to dry on so that airflow can get all around. And now I'm ready for the next step.